Good day, everybody, and welcome to another edition of the Military and Foreign Affairs Network. I am your host, the voice of reason, and yes, you guessed it, we are doing another lesson in insanity. And today we're talking about the slow death of the United States military. This will be a slow process, a long process, a process that could be stopped. It could be stopped cold in its tracks, but the question is, will it? There's a couple of very glaring issues right now that are facing the United States military. Recruiting is a huge challenge right now for the U.S. military, specifically the U.S. Army. The Army is 15,000 soldiers short of hitting its 60,000 recruitment goal. Some would blame it on a variety of reasons. Woke craziness in the Army, military. Other reasons are also very much coming to the forefront as well, such as Project Genesis. So you have a mixture of Big Brother, Big Tech. Yes, Project Genesis is part of that Big Tech, Big Brother social experiment to see how far people will go to allow an intrusive government into their lives. That's Project Genesis. And then the wokeness. The crazy equity and inclusion campaign by left-wing extremists that have taken over the school systems in the United States have now put its ugly paw prints on the U.S. Armed Forces. The U.S. Army right now is renaming military bases. These military bases were once named after Confederate generals after the Civil War. It was a very important part of putting the country back together. Even persons, generals, Confederate soldiers, such as General Lee, I mean, most people don't even know that he ran West Point before the outbreak of the Civil War. So for him to have his statue torn down and removed from West Point after it's been there for forever, again, complete disgrace. Complete disgrace. The military bases that are being renamed. So Fort Benning is going to be now Fort Julia Moore. Fort Bragg is going to be called Fort Liberty. Fort Gordon is going to be named Fort Eisenhower. Fort A.P. Hill in Virginia is going to be renamed Dr. Mary Edward Walker. Fort Dr. Mary Edward Walker. Fort Hood, the Great Place, is going to be renamed Fort Cavazos. Fort Lee is a duet. It's going to be named after Lieutenant General Arthur J. Gregg and Lieutenant Colonel Charity Adams. Fort Polk in Louisiana is going to be renamed Fort Sergeant William Henry Johnson. Fort Rucker in Alabama is going to be renamed Michael J. Novosel Sr. So that's what's happening. However you think of this, it is happening. And again, it's being perpetrated by individuals who do not understand history, do not care about history, and want to rewrite history. But again, it was a very incredibly important part of Reconstruction, reuniting the United States after one of its most bloodiest armed conflicts. We fought each other, and that's being thrown out the window. Left-wing wokeness. Compounding this is Project Genesis. Yes, Project Genesis. What is Project Genesis? I've talked about it before. I'm going to quickly talk about it again, just to kind of give you, the listener, the understanding of just what Project Genesis is. So, going back, let's say 20 years ago, 10 years ago, 30 years ago, when you joined the military, when you joined the Army, joined the Marine Corps, joined the Navy, joined the Air Force, joined the Coast Guard, you were normally instructed, or you knew that when you went in, if you had some sort of issue when you were a little kid, when you were a child, you probably don't want to talk about it too much. You don't want to let people know. And generally speaking, that methodology panned out fine. People would go through basic training. They would find a way to get through it. And you just didn't talk about any previous ailment you may have had, because it really wasn't that big of an issue. And if it was that big of an issue, it would be found out. And if it prevented you from doing your job or your duty, then yes, it could hold you back from going forward in basic training or advanced training or what have you. With Project Genesis, the military, the Department of Defense, prior to you even going to MEPS, is aware of anything that has happened to you in your childhood, including every prescription that you have ever been written by a doctor. So if you have been written medication for ADHD, if you have ever had some minor allergies as a child and maybe were given some sort of inhaler, all that now is going to require, or has required, a waiver for you to get into the Army, Air Force, what have you. So Project Genesis is automatically going to flag you for not reporting every single drug that you were ever prescribed, and it is causing a lot of military recruiters great deals of headaches right now because of this. Now, on the flip side, completely okay if you decide that you're transitioning from a dude to a girl, or you're transitioning from a chick to a dude, and vice versa, and you really don't know what you are, and you're just batshit crazy. Come on in. The left wants you. The left wants crazy people. Okay, not a problem. But if you ever had been prescribed some ADHD meds, Ritalin, whatever, nope. Sorry. You need a waiver. And that waiver is a long process. And this is part of the problem. The military was never broke. The military in the 80s, military in the 70s, the military in the 90s operated just fine without Project Genesis. Operated just fine without the wokeness of renaming military bases and continuing the left-wing indoctrination process of the United States. And that's why recruitment is down. And that's why it will continue to go down. We will decrease in terms of being short by 15,000. Next year it will probably be 30,000, because that ability to then go back and then re-recruit those 15,000 miss is going to be that much more challenging. And then they have two options: decrease the size of the force because it's unsustainable, or change the rules. But what's happening right now, and what has happened with the renaming of bases, is a travesty. In reference to General Lee, some people know this, other people do not. Prior to becoming a general for the Confederate States of America, General Lee was offered to head U.S. Army forces for the Union. Didn't do it. So it's very interesting to see how history is being perverted. Again, statue of General Lee. However you feel about that, it's part of the national history. It happened. You can't erase it. And that's what the left likes to do. They enjoy changing history, rewriting history, eliminating history. So again, we'll probably continue to see this traumatic event take place, continue to take shape, continue to degrade, to continue to destroy the U.S. military. Again, slow process, and it will continue until someone or a group of people decide to stand up and say, no more. We're done with this. We're not going to tolerate this anymore. We're going back to the way it was. That's the only option. Because again, the end game, where we are heading, does not look good. Have a good day.